by Eric Maria Remarque. This book is to be neither an accusation nor a confession, and least of all an adventure, for death is not an adventure to those who stand face to face with it. It will try simply to tell of a generation of men who, even though they may have escaped shells, were destroyed by the war. 1. We're at rest 5 miles behind the front. Yesterday we were relieved, and now our bellies are full of beef and haricot beans. We are satisfied and at peace. Each man has another mess tin full for the evening, and what is more, there is double ration of sausage and bread. That puts a man in fine trim. We have not had such luck as this for a long time. The cook, with his carroty head, is begging us to eat. He beckons with his ladle to everyone that passes, and spoons him out a great dollop. He does not see how he can empty his stew pot in time for coffee. Jaden and Mueller have produced 2 wash basins and had them filled up to the brim as a reserve. In Jaden, this is a veracity. In Mueller, it is a foresight. Where Jaden puts it is all a mystery, for he is and always will be as thin as a rake. What's more important still is the issue of a double ration of smokes, 10 cigars, 20 cigarettes, and 2 quids of chew per man. Now that is decent. I have exchanged my chewing tobacco with Kaczynski for his cigarettes, which means I have 40 altogether. That's enough for a day. It is true we have no right to this windfall. The Prussian is not so generous. We have only a miscalculation to thank for it. 14 days ago, we had to go up and relieve the front line. It was fairly quiet on our sector, so the quartermaster who remained in the rear had requisitioned the usual quantity of rations and provided for the full company of 150 men. But on the last day, an astonishing number of English heavies opened up on us with high explosive, drumming ceaselessly on our position, so that we suffered severely and came back only 80 strong. Last night we moved back and settled down to get a good sleep for once. Kaczynski is right when he says it would not be such a bad war if only one could get a little more sleep. In line we have had next to none, and 14 days is a long time at one stretch. It was noon before the first of us crawled out of our quarters. Half an hour later, every man had his mess tin, and we gathered at the cookhouse, which smelled greasy and nourishing. At the head of the queue, of course, were the hungriest. Little Albert Crop, the clearest thinker among us, and therefore only a lance corporal. Mueller, who still carries his school textbooks with him, dreams of examinations, and during a bombardment mutters propositions in physics. Lear, who wears a full beard and has a preference for the girls from officers' brothels. He swears that they are obliged by an army order to wear silk chemises and to bathe before entertaining guests of the rank of captain and upwards. And as the fourth, myself, Paul Baumer. All 4 are 19 years of age, and all 4 joined up from the same class as volunteers for the war. Close behind us were our friends, Jaden, a skinny locksmith of our own age, the biggest eater of the company. He sits down to eat as thin as a grasshopper and gets up as a bug in the family way. Hay Westhus, of the same age, a peat digger, who can easily hold a ration loaf in his hand and say, "Guess what I've got in my fist?" Then, deterring, a peasant who thinks of nothing but his family farmyard and his wife. And finally, Stanislaw Kaczynski, the leader of our group. Shrewd, cunning, and hard-bitten. 40 years of age, with a face of the soil, blue eyes, bent shoulders, and a remarkable nose for dirty weather, good food, and soft jobs. Our gang formed the head of the queue before the cookhouse. We were growing impatient, for the cook paid no attention to us. Finally, Kaczynski called to him. Say, Heinrich, open up the soup kitchen. Anyone see the beans are done? He shook his head sleepily. You must all be there first, Jaden grinned. We are all here. The sergeant cook still took no notice. That may do for you, he said. But where are the others? They won't be fed by you today. They're either in the dressing station or pushing up daisies. The cook was quite disconcerted. As the facts dawned on him, he was staggered. And I have cooked for 150 men. Crop poked him in the ribs. Then for once we'll have enough. Come on, begin. Suddenly, a vision overcame Jaden. His sharp, mousy features began to shine. His eyes grew small with cunning. His jaws twitched, and he whispered hoarsely, Man, and you've got bread for 150 men, too, huh? The sergeant cook nodded, absent-minded and bewildered. Jaden seized him by the tunic. And sausage? Ginger nodded again. Jaden's chaps quivered. Tobacco, too? Yes, everything. Jaden beamed. What a bean feast! That's all for us! Each man gets... Wait a minute. Yes, practically 2 issues. Then Ginger stirred himself and said, That won't do. We got excited and began to crowd around. Why won't that do, you old carrot? Demanded Kaczynski. 80 men can't have what is meant for 150. We'll soon show you, growled Mueller. I don't care about the stoop, and I can only issue rations for 80 men, persisted Ginger. Kaczynski got angry. You might be more generous for once. You haven't drawn food for 80 men. You've drawn it for the second company. Good. Let's have it then. We are the second company. We began to jostle the fellow. No one felt kindly toward him, for it was his fault that the food often came up to us in the line too late and cold. Under shell fire, he wouldn't bring his kitchen up near enough, so that our soup carriers had to go much farther than those of the other companies. Now, Bulk in the first company is a much better fellow. He is as fat as a hamster in winter, but he trundles his pots when it comes to that right up to the very front line. We were in just the right mood, and there would certainly have been a dust-up if our company commander had not appeared. He informed himself of the dispute and remarked, Yes, we did have heavy losses yesterday. He glanced into the Dixie. The beans look good. Ginger nodded. Cooked with meat and fat. The lieutenant looked at us. He knew what we were thinking, and he knew many other things, too, because he came to the company as a non-com and was promoted from the ranks. He lifted the lid from the Dixie again, sniffed. Then, passing on, he said, Bring me a plateful. Serve out all the rations. We can do with them. Ginger looked sheepish as Jaden danced around him. It doesn't cost you a thing. Anyone would think the quartermaster store belonged to him. And now get on with it, you old blubber sticker, and don't you miscount either. You be hanged, spat out Ginger. When things got beyond him, he throws up the sponge altogether. He just goes to pieces. And as if to show that all things were equal to him, of his own free will, he issued in addition 1/2 pound of synthetic honey to each man. Today is wonderfully good. The mail has come, and almost every man has a few letters and papers. We stroll over to the meadow behind the billets. Crop has the round lid of margarine tub under his arm. On the right side of the meadow is a large common latrine has been built, a roofed and durable construction. But that is for recruits who as yet have not learned to make the most of whatever comes our way. We want something better. Scattered about everywhere, there are separate individual boxes for the same purpose. They are square, neat boxes with wooden sides all around and have impeccably satisfactory seats. On the sides are hand grips, enabling one to shift them about. We move three together in a ring and sit down comfortably, and it will be 2 hours before we get up again. I well remember how embarrassed we were as recruits in barracks when we had to use the general latrine. There were no doors, and 20 men sat side by side as in a railway carriage, so that they could be reviewed all at one glance. For soldiers must always be under supervision. Since then, we have learned better than to be shy about such trifling immodesties. In time, things far worse than that came easy to us. Here in the open air, though, the business is entirely a pleasure. I no longer understand why we should always have shied at these things before. They are, in fact, just as natural as eating and drinking. We might perhaps have paid no particular attention to them had they not figured so large in our experience, nor been such novelties to our minds. To the old hands, they had long been a mere matter of course. The soldier is on friendlier terms than other men with his stomach and intestines. 3/4 of his vocabulary is derived from these regions, and they give an intimate flavor to expressions of his greatest joy, as well as of his deepest indignation. Mm. It is impossible to express oneself in any other way so clearly and pithily. Our families and our teachers will be shocked when we go home, but here it is the universal language. Enforced publicity has our eyes restored the character of complete innocence to all these things. More than that, they are so much a matter of course that their comfortable performance is fully as much enjoyed as the playing of a safe top running flush. Not for nothing was the word latrine rumor invented. These places are the regimental gossip shop and common rooms. We feel ourselves for the time being better off than any palatial white tiled convenience. There, it can only be hygienic. Here, it is beautiful. These are wonderfully carefree hours. Over us is the blue sky. On the horizon float the bright, yellow, sunlit observation balloons and the many little white clouds of the anti aircraft shells. Often they rise in a sheaf as they follow after an airman. We hear the muffled rumble of the front only as very distant thunder, bumblebees droning by, quite drown it out. Around us stretches the flowery meadow. The grasses sway their tall spears. The white butterflies flutter around and float on the soft, warm wind of the late summer. We take off our caps and lay them down beside us. We read letters and newspapers and smoke. The wind plays with our hair, it plays with our words and thoughts. The three boxes stand in the midst of the glowing red field poppies. We set the lid of the margarine tub on our knees, and so have a good table for a game of scat. Crop has the cards with him. After every miserere ouvert, we have a round of nap. One could sit like this forever. The notes of an accordion float across the billets. Often we lay aside the cards and look about us. One of us will say, "Well, boys," or "It was near it was near a thing that time," and for a moment we fall silent. There is in each of us a feeling of constraint. We are all sensible of it. It needs no words to communicate it. It might easily have happened that we should not be sitting here on our boxes today. Came damn near to that. And so everything is new, brave. Red poppies and good food, cigarettes and summer breeze. Crop asks, "Anyone seen Kemrick lately?" "He's up at St. Joseph's." I tell him. Mueller explains that he has a flesh wound in his thigh, a good blighty. We decide to go and see him this afternoon. Kropp pulls out a letter. Cantrek sends you all his best wishes. We laugh. Mueller throws his cigarette away and says, I wish he was here. Cantrek had been our schoolmaster, a stern little man in a gray tailcoat with a face like a shrew mouse. He was about the same size as Corporal Himmeltoss, the terror of Klosterberg. It is very queer that the unhappiness of the world is so often brought on by small men. There are so much more energetic and uncompromising than big fellows. I have always taken good care to keep out of the sections with small company commanders. They're mostly confounded little martinets. During the drill time, Cantrick gave us long lectures until the whole of our class went, under his shepherding, to the district commandment and volunteered. I can see him now, as he used to glare at us through his spectacles and say in a moving voice, Won't you join up, comrades? These teachers always carry their feelings ready in their waistcoat pockets and trot them out by the hour. But we didn't think of that then. There was indeed one of us who hesitated and did not want to fall into line. That was Joseph Bem, a plump, homely fellow, but he did allow himself to be persuaded. Otherwise, he would have been ostracized. And perhaps more of us thought as he did, but no one could very well stand out. Because at that time, even one's parents were ready with the word coward. No one had the vaguest idea what we were in for. The wisest were just the poor and simple people. They knew the war to be misfortune, whereas those who were better off and should have been able to see more clearly what the consequences would be were beside themselves with joy. Kaczynski said that was a result of their upbringing. It made them stupid. And what Kat said, he had thought about. Strange to say, Bem was one of the first to fall. He got hit in the eye during an attack, and we left him lying for dead. We couldn't bring him with us because we had to come back helter-skelter. In the afternoon, suddenly we heard him call and saw him crawling about in no man's land. He had only been knocked unconscious. Because he could not see and was mad with pain, he failed to keep under cover and so was shot down before anyone could go and fetch him in. Naturally, we couldn't blame Cantrek for this. Where would the world be if one brought every man to book? There were thousands of Cantreks, all of whom were convinced that they were acting for the best in a way that cost them nothing. And that is why they let us down so badly. For us lads of 18, they ought to have been mediators and guides to the world of maturity, the world of work, of duty, of culture, of progress, to the future. We often made fun of them and played jokes on them, but in our hearts, we trusted them. The idea of authority which they represented was associated in our minds with a greater insight and a more humane wisdom. But the first death we saw shattered this belief. We had to recognize that our generation was more to be trusted than theirs.